John Caldwell of Caldwell Vineyards, better known in the industry as John fucking Caldwell, smuggler, owner, head dude of Caldwell Vineyards. Man, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you on the Mr. Wine Guy podcast today.
Man. You're just dealing with a fucking farmer today. That's all you're dealing with. So don't get too into big time stuff. Shit. We could just talk about damn near anything you want to talk about. I'm in a good mood. Had nice big cup of homemade coffee. Life is good. Just start anywhere you want.
What's your go-to kind of coffee, man? Since we're just going rogue here today and just doing whatever.
My wife bought me a new espresso machine. I do a double load of Pete's.
Yeah.
Okay? And I hit the button 3 times and it just fucking takes every bit of flavor out of that goddamn double load.
It squeezes it to death.
And yeah, and then it gives me a buzz. Oh, right away. That's not cocaine, but it really fires you up.
You got to hit the bathroom right after?
No, I got a retail bladder. It lasts a couple of these cups.
You got an experienced bladder?
Oh, yeah. That fucker got to go all day when I was in the shoe business. So I stretched the piss out of it.
Yeah, man.
And anyway, so yeah, I can go all night.
Is that what Joey said?
Poor guys have to run in and out every 3 or 4 hours.
No.
I can go all the way.
Dude, it looks beautiful over there right now, man. You got that morning California scene, a little chill in the air.
My office. Can you believe this is my office, man?
Oh, dude, it's cool, man. Like you're living the dream, man.
This is close to living as close as you can get to a dream. The property it's upward between 300 and 600 feet up from the valley floor. So we have a view of the whole darn valley up here.
Mm-hmm.
You drop in one of these days, we go up to around 600. You see all the way to Calistoga, Diamond Mountain, Spring Mountain. You can look down, you can see the bay.
Mm-hmm.
Where that goes south. So it's just a spectacular piece of property.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I'm excited to have you here today, and I know we're going to have a lot of fun. I do want to have some time to talk about some serious stuff, some things that got you to where you are today in the wine industry. And I know you're not just the everyday winemaker, the everyday wine grower. A lot of times people are referred to as pioneers in the wine industry. And there's a lot of truth to that with people in general, people like some of the old dudes like yourself that have really paved the way. But for you, it was different, man, because you actually went out, took risks, and in exchange for those risks, you've been rewarded, man. And not a lot of people would have done what you've done. Your story is incredible. It's super cool. I've known about you for quite some time. And as I got to really studying about you for the podcast, I was more and more inspired by you as a person, not just as a winemaker, because you as a person, as an entrepreneur, is really why you're sitting here today, why this office that you referred to is living the dream. And I think if a lot of people could take away from you from anything today from the podcast, it's just going after your dreams. Because ultimately, man, that's what you did. That's what you have inspired people to do. People that are listening today will find that inspiration, but people that have already heard your story are inspired by you because of that, man. And for the word pioneer, you are truly a fucking pioneer, dude. And so I'm excited to have you on the podcast today. And in all truth and in all honesty, man, it is an absolute honor for me.
Thank you, my man. Thank you. Hey, that's pretty cool. You have nailed me. Once I wanted to plant this vineyard in 1980. In April 81, I drove out in my black Cadillac. It's a cute story. I really have. And I'm on a rocky, volcanic hillside. And it was really the hillside back then. There was nothing out in Coombsville in this area. It was, you run a few head of cattle on it, and that's about all you can do. There wasn't anything else you could do. And as soon as the cat drivers got their rippers down and breaking up the original old volcanic hillside. They just broke into an enormous amount of volcanic rock, the kind with the holes in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's iron rich, so it's reddish brown, the rock itself. And it was from a standpoint of prepping it for a vineyard, it was a nightmare.
Right.
Because we just basically, it was like the moon looked more plantable than this place. There was just rock everywhere.
Yeah.
But they got their rippers down. And that was cool. They were able to get it down in most spots about 4 feet, which is about all a vine needs to really produce 3-4 ton an acre.
Mm-hmm.
Get your roots down. And vines tend to love rock or good drainage. So
Totally.
it turned out to be, even though it was a nightmare, a fabulous piece of ground for a vineyard.
Let me ask you a question. Was it Abreu that was digging up that ground?
His brother.
Was his brother? Okay.
Yeah, his brother. Yeah, he and Bud Myers. This is 50, damn, it was 45 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a long fucking time ago.
It's like yesterday.
It's just like yesterday.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anything going on. Bud with his cat, he had a 9, an 8, and a 7. And he pulled them all out here. And man, oh man, shit, there weren't anybody else doing this stuff back then.
Yeah.
So you knew everybody. And like I say, David Abreu, my God, he was just getting started. We didn't know. We just really, you can't believe that 40 years ago, we were just starting what is now become Napa Valley.
That's
it
crazy.
Wasn't like this at all 40 years ago.
That's why I call you a pioneer, but at the same time, you have a unique story about how you smuggled clones basically from France to Canada, and then you crossed the border. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit, because if people aren't aware of, that's what really makes you unique. When you realized you became a wine grower back on that day in April of 81, what was it about that moment? Was it a particular thing, or were you just, I've made it?
It was a particular moment in JFC's life that he'll never forget. So remember, I was in the shoe business.
Yeah.
I get a call from Bud Meyer, and hey, I want you to come out, man. We're running in. I mean, it's going to be a nightmare. So I jump in my black Cadillac, black on black. It had a $1,800 stereo, so the seats went boom and all that kind of shit. Lots of gold chains.
Oh, oh man,
I had to have some serious fucking gold chains.
Yeah.
And calfskin boots, silk shirts unbuttoned down to my navel, that kind of thing. That was cool.
Hell yeah, man.
What the fuck? I drive out and park the cab and walk over. And the rocks were just, anyway, so I get on the D6 and Abreu starts showing me around the whole deal and what he's running into. But he said one magic thing to me. See, up to this time, nobody gave me thumbs up. Yeah, you can plant a vineyard here, but why? We didn't even have 4-wheel drive tractors.
Wow.
I mean, you couldn't even. Kubota just came out with their 4-wheel drive of about 1980, and Ford didn't even have one. I had to buy my front end from Switzerland to put it on my Ford to get a 4-wheel drive Ford. Anyways, I drive out, climb up on this 6. Abreu's driving around, and he said, Caldwell, we think you might have a good vineyard here. When I went, what? You really think this could be good? Yeah, we think it could be good because we're getting the rippers down. So I asked him, and I said, show me what you're talking about. So he put the rippers down on the 6, and we went down the property line and then turned around and came back. And it was an April day. It was a beautiful day, clear as a bell. You could see all the way to Calistoga. And the smell of that fresh soil, the smell of that, I finally looked at what I had, climbed off that cat, and I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Wow. So it was in that moment, man. That's cool.
It was so cool.
As an entrepreneur in the wine industry, and even at that moment, you have to go back a little bit. I know your mom was an entrepreneur and she had a shoe business. And I know you worked in the shoe business as a result of finding inspiration from your mom's journey in entrepreneurship, and in particular in the late 60s. Was there anything about her entrepreneurship that inspired you to step out and pick that piece of real estate in Napa Valley and eventually find yourself where you are today, being this mega superstar in the wine industry? Can you give her a lot of that credit?
Oh, I give her credit for being probably one of the best supportive moms anybody could have.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
Come on. Remember, I had in my history, I had polio, right?
Yeah.
So I get out of the hospital. I'm 5.5 years old. I get out of the hospital and they put this great big brace on me. And Christ, it weighed about a half a ton. And in a couple of weeks, she just took that brace. She says, "You're not wearing this goddamn thing anymore.
Oh,
You
really?
learn to walk."
That's cool.
Isn't that cool?
Your mom's as much of a G as you are.
Oh, yeah, she was a pistol. I got her picture right there. She went to 95.
Wow.
And Daddy went to 96.
That's cool, man.
And they died within a month of each other.
Wow. Somebody passed along after from a broken heart for sure, man.
It was just it was a wonderful time. They both had a really nice life, and you finally wear out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dad called his own shots. He just told me one day, it was about July of 17, and he says, "I think I'm going to die in 2 months." And I went, "What?" Yeah, I'm loading up fluid, and it's just no. I think I'm gonna call it quits in 2 months. And I called my brother and I said, "Jay, you know what Dad just said? He said he's going to die in 2 months." "What?" "Yeah, he's going to die in 2 months." I said, "Fuck, we better have a memorial while he's still alive, for God's sakes." So we called up a bunch of his friends, and the word got out that Jack's having a memorial.
And he's going to be there.
Oh, the fucker he looked 85.
Yeah.
He'd called his own shot, drank a half a bottle of rocket science that day, and everybody was hugging him, kissing him, taking pictures. And by God, damn near within those 2.5, 3 months, he checked out, went to sleep. Isn't that cool?
That's crazy. That's cool. But like, I hear what you're saying. You hate to see your parents pass. I know life, we all have that time that's coming, but it's cool, like you said, that he called that shot.
He called the shot. And the day that I told him I was going to plant a vineyard on this piece of shit property, because he wanted me to sell it originally. "What are you doing with that thing? What are you going to do with that piece of shit?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm going to redo it, and maybe I'll break it up into 10-acre parcels. And you're not going to make any money out there." And then I told him, I said, "Dad, I decided to plant some vineyard." "Vineyard? You want to plant vineyard out there? You're going to need a backhoe." And Boykins wanted me to buy that old shitty backhoe. I could put it all back together. And Carl has that dump truck. You're going to need a dump truck. Pretty soon, that fucker he never stopped helping me for the next 30 years.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
It seems like he was more supportive in that than it was with you wanting to spread it out and separate it with your original plan.
It's exactly right. That was anyway, it just worked out beautiful. And then having Dad here, of course, Mom drove him crazy around the house. So he had to have during retirement, he had to have something on his mind. So that way he could always get out here. But he was here 3 days, 7 days a week for the next 30 days. It's so
That's cool, man. Well, I want to jump in and talk about the infamous smuggling story. I want you to talk about the Border Patrol and the receipts, and of course the oak tree and the burial at the oak tree. But I guess my real question about this story, because I want to paint the picture from the States to Obreon, and then how you got to the border and then to the oak tree. I'm curious though, after you tell that story, looking back now, is there a way or a moment where you look back and you say, "Man, I probably could have pushed the envelope a little more"? Like you get to tell this story today where you did so much and you smuggled the clones. And is there a time where you sit around and you say to yourself, "I could have pushed the needle a little bit more on that, or I could have done a little bit more there"? Or are you completely satisfied with how everything turned out?
At the time, with clones being brand new in France, and really nothing going on in California. We had no clonal work being done in California at that time. I was breaking new ground.
Yeah.
No one knew if the French clones, which were chosen with the French environment, completely different weather, completely different soil, if the clonal thing would work. What is picked in France as a top clone might not work in California. So the fact that I got 6 clones over, 2 Cab, 2 Cab Franc, and 2 Merlot, that was enough to tell us right away if there was something to this stuff. And since it did happen, the wines came out so superior within our first real vintage that we knew we did have something. So
Yeah.
I was, but then I didn't stop, of course.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know.
And remember, I became a licensee of the French government. So I went from a smuggler to the goddamn licensee of the French government.
Yeah.
And they were willing to do business with a smuggler. There was some money for them. They still get 25 cents every royalty on every French clone, registered French clone.
Oh, wow.
25 cents. You know, and a million vines is not much. So
Yeah.
they have done very well with, and I was the guy who did it.
Yeah. Tell the story, man. Talk about how you found yourself taking a trip over to Obrion and then put us at the border patrol and talk about those receipts.
The Obrion experience is what opened my eye to it. That's being there in 1982. They took us I took Gallo McLean there. He was a nurseryman here in Napa, and Gallo was a graduate at the University of Bordeaux. He had credibility and all, and we had a really good tour. They took me into a room, pretty good sized room, maybe 1,000 square feet or so, and it was set up just for clonal research at Obrion. They're replanting this very famous vineyard. You go through when you go there for a tasting, they give this wonderful presentation, and it goes all the way back to the history of Obrion, 1496. There was grapes planted there for the first, all this kind of stuff. And so they had a tremendous history that they had to really draw upon, and they knew they had clones. Became known that there is certain vines that were different than other vines.
Mm-hmm.
And the Germans got into it too about the same time, around in the 50s. And they weren't talking about clones in California, but most, like the Germans, the Italians, the French, Spain didn't get into it until the 90s. But everybody knew that there were some vines superior than others. So trying to find those superior vines, the mother vine of a new clone, Obrion had set up their own lab, and they planted what they thought were the best. Visually, they would pick them out of their old vineyard and take cuttings of one vine, put a tag on it so it had a name and a date and all that kind of stuff. And then they would plant enough grapes from that vine, and enough to fill up it's about a 5-gallon or so fermenter.
Mm-hmm.
And in this room was a shelf on 3 sides with all these small fermenters. Each one would be fermenting a separate clone, and it was connected to a computer in the corner. This is 1982. 82. So when you're talking computers, they were the size of a car.
Yeah. And they were antique.
They were huge. Yeah, you didn't have a little flip top like that.
No.
It was the size of a table.
Yeah.
And I thought, what the hell is going on here? Because clones back then, not to change the subject, but back then when we said a clone in Napa, we called it from a vineyard.
Mm.
So if you got a Cabernet some cuttings to take from one vineyard to another, you would call Stag's Leap Vineyard. Okay. So then if I got the wood from Stag's Leap for my Cabernet, I would call it the Stag's Leap clone,
mm-hmm.
or the Spring Mountain clone, or the Stony Hill clone for Chardonnay, that kind of thing. It wasn't a clone at all. It was just a vineyard selection.
Right.
So we didn't know what we're doing when we said clone. But anyway, so now I'm there. They gave me a brochure of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I thought, man, oh man, this is what I want to have for my vineyard.
Totally.
Come on. I'm starting with the clean slate here. Everything was that year. I met a nurseryman in the south of France, and then I went back and talked to him in '83, and I was asking him if I could, if he just make some cuttings for me, and I could stick them in my suitcase. And that's what a lot of guys did, right? You just wrap them with wet towels and bring them home, that kind of thing. And he goes, John, I don't know why you want to do this. He says, I'm doing business with this guy in Canada, and he's already got growing some dormant bench grafts up there. And why don't you contact him? So I fly home. This is in fall of '83. And I contact him, and he had about 6,000 or 7,000 vines, which 2 clones of Cab, 2 clones of Merlot, and 2 clones of Cabernet Franc. And these were on-top clones. So these were direct from the on-top. It wasn't somebody's vineyard. It came from a mother block of on-top clones.
Mm-hmm.
But man, this is good stuff. This isn't bullshit.
Yeah.
So I called the guy, and he introduced me. The guy in Canada introduced me to a couple in the New York side. So I had a place to stay to start my smuggling in '84.
Yeah.
So I flew up into Buffalo on a cold morning, and it was like snowing and colder than hell. It was like 8 degrees outside. I ran a rent-a-wreck. It was a Chevy Impala. I rented a '79 Chevy because it had the biggest trunk that I could find on these used car lot, rental car lot.
Yeah.
So anyway, rent the Chevy. I drive to the couple that's being my host, Kathleen and Richard Line. And that night we met the people on the French side, on the Canadian side, had dinner, and everything's set for me to start my smuggling. The next morning, I get up. Kathleen Line is making my coffee. And she said, John, Richard and I were talking last night. We think it's too risky for you to do it. I'm going to do it for you. I said, yeah, I'm going to do it for you. It's too risky for you to do this. So she jumps into her Mercedes and goes back and forth 3 times for me and brings about 4,400 vines over. And as soon as she'd come in to her garage, I'd unload them, put them in the biggest box United Parcel would take. And I could get about 400 plus vines in each box. And I'd take them down to Buffalo United Parcel and send them to my shoe store as shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 10 or 11 boxes sent to my shoe store in Yountville. Okay. On a Sunday morning, there was still a trunk load left. And Kathleen is saying, John, I just can't do it this morning. I don't feel good. She wasn't in good health. So I said, okay, Kathleen. I jumped in my rent-a-wreck, drove over and took everything, all the rest of the French vines, Cabernet Franc, hit the border, and then that's where I showed him the passport. He looks at me and he goes, oh, I see you're from California. So what were you doing over there this morning? I said, I just went over to have breakfast and check the falls out. And he looks at me like, so how were the falls? They were fucking frozen. It was that cold.
Yeah.
I didn't realize at Niagara Falls there was water coming underneath the ice.
Oh, yeah.
There was. I said, there really wasn't any fall this morning. And he goes, yeah, it's pretty cold around here. Let me have your keys. So I pulled the keys out, and he pops the trunk, and there's 1,400 vines in there. And he goes, what are they doing in there? I said, I bought them here in New York yesterday. I just went over to, oh, that's right. She just went over to have breakfast, check the falls out. I want you to tell your story to my boss. So he goes in and he calls, and the boss comes down. And the boss just chats a little bit. And he goes, hey, pull your car around back. Oh, okay. So I pull the car around back, and he's chit-chatting with the guy, and the boss comes over and he goes, I understand these are grapevines. And you bought them here in New York. Where did you buy them? So I had a nursery in mind, so at least I had that. He goes, and how much did you pay for them? And out of my mouth comes, in Canadian or American. And he looks at me like, you are the dumbest fucking smuggler I've ever run into.
Oh, man.
Get up to my office. Okay, so I go up in the office. Not only did I fuck up there, but I also had my records in a little briefcase on the front seat of my car. And that's where Kathleen went over, and she had a bunch of yellow carbon copies from United Parcel. They were big back then. They were were pretty good size, and they smelled like carbon dye. Ooh, not too. Anyway, the guy's interrogating me, and I'm not telling. I can't tell him anything. Hell, my mule's 69 years of age. Her husband's a goddamn attorney in this great little town called Lewiston, so I can't incriminate anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hemming and hawing, and he gets frustrated, and he's looking at my stuff, and he picks up these 10 carbon copies. And he starts reading it, and he goes, I see here in the last 2-3 days, you sent 10 boxes of shoes to Youngville. Where's Youngville? I said, what's in Napa Valley? He goes, I have a feeling, I have a shoe store. I was buying closeouts in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to trace those. So he puts them down in front of me, gets up, goes to the next office. They pull out a phone book. They're trying to figure out which number to call United Parcel. And they're not watching me. They were about 15, 20 feet away. So I reached over, I crumbled them up, and I ate them. So I ate the 10 or 11 carbon copies. I was chewing them away when he came back in the office looking for them, and I tucked a whole bunch right back in my head. I should have asked him for a glass of water. She's looking for those, and he goes, what'd you do with those? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Joe, this guy did something with them. Come on in here. We got to. So they checked the trash cans and the desks and everywhere. And all right, let's take them in the back room. So they take me in the back room, put me in a little toilet room, only a door width with a little sink and a toilet. No heat. There was no heat back there. It was colder than hell in the rear of this customs office. And so I take all my clothes off. He opens the door, and I'm standing there stark naked. He reaches in and pulls that ear back, and then he pulls that ear back. Nope, not there. All right, bend over. So I bend over, put my hands on the toilet, and he didn't dig around or anything, but I think I don't even know if he touched my butt, but it was.
This dude was reaching, no pun intended.
So anyway, he goes, Joe, give me his clothes. So he throws the clothes at me. He says, get your clothes and get back on and get back in the office. So I go back in the office. Now he's smoking, though. The back of his neck was all red. I put one over on him, and he didn't like that.
Yeah.
So now he's going to throw me in the Buffalo jail. This is fucking getting serious, right? This is getting serious. Spending a Sunday in the Buffalo jail. He's coming down hard on me. You're going to go in the Buffalo jail. You better start talking. I can't say anything. And I'm staying with Kathleen and Richard was an attorney. So I had his card in my wallet. So I pulled that out, and I said, can I make one phone call? And he says, I'll give you one call. All right. So I call. Richard answers the phone. Beep, beep. Hello. Hi, Richard. John, where in the hell are you? For God's sakes, it's been over 2 hours. What are you doing? Richard, I'm still at the border. I got caught. He goes, ooh, not good, John. Not good. You know, when an attorney goes, ooh, not good. It ain't good. He goes, but I'm going to call you right back. Just relax for a minute. Okay. Well, so the guy's beating on me. You're going to jail. La, la, la. The phone rings. He picks it up, leans back in his chair, and he starts getting a real serious look on his face. And you want me to release him? In the care of Richard line. Okay. Goodbye. Puts the phone down, looks at me, goes, I don't know who in the hell, but that was my boss, and I'm to release you. So get your shit and get out of here. I can go, get out of here. So I get whatever I have left. I start walking out, and I walk by. It was a long hallway to the parking lot. And I walked by my babies. There was my clones right there in the hallway. And I turned around about halfway down. I turned around. I said, is there any way I can get the fuck out of here? We're going to destroy those. So I went, maybe I better not press this thing any longer. And I hit the back door. It opens up. I go down, get in the car. I drive back. Now I'm sitting in the living room of Kathleen, and Richard says, John, you want a little bourbon? I said, oh, I'd love some. So he pours a little Jack, sitting, and I said, what happened today? And he had a little smirk on his face. He was such a great guy. He goes, you were pretty lucky today, my boy.
Yeah.
He says, back in college, in law school, one of my best friends, Richard Pine, is now head of customs for the state of New York. And I called and I got your ass out of that tight situation.
Wow.
So I was staying with probably the only guy in the world who could get my ass out and go into the Buffalo jail that day. Isn't that cool?
Dude, your story was necessary. That's why you were able to.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. Now, for the people that are listening, why did you have to smuggle the clones? Why couldn't you just, bring them over and let's all make good wine, whether you're in California or France or Italy? Why did you have to go to the extent to smuggle the clones?
Okay. Good question, because no one makes sense of it. Why would you have to smuggle clones or grapevines?
Mm-hmm.
It comes under importation law. You can't, remember when you come with a banana or an orange from another country, they take it and throw it away, right?
Yeah.
It's a law. The law was passed, I think, in the 1800s, where they didn't want to bring diseases and stuff and bugs from other nations to the United States. And it was probably a good law, because we actually did fuck up the world pretty bad, like Australia importing a lot of stuff and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you bring it in legally, it takes 7 years minimum to do it legal. You bring your collection in, you can't even bring in your whole collection. You can only bring in small amounts of each clone, and you have to turn that over to an importation facility that can actually test them. That takes 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
At the 3rd year, they'll release them back to you. Then you have to take these little potted vines that cleared customs or cleared the protection, so that there's no disease. They test it for 7 different viruses that grapevines can get. If it clears that, then they'll hand them back to you in the 3rd year. Then you have to plant them, and then you have to grow them a size that the canes become the size of your little finger.
Mm-hmm.
And you can take the buds off those. Wherever there's a leaf on a cane, there's a bud, and then you can create a vine that's identical to the mother vine. So that's how you propagate clones, is from the original mother vines. And that takes up 3 more years to get the vine big enough. So now you got 6 years in it. Then you graft the vines, and it's going to take another year or 2, depending on what kind of vine you want to get. So it's either a 7 or 8 year minimum period to do it legally. So that's why I decided, man, I can't wait.
Yeah, 7 or 8 years. 7 or 8 years, you're going to want to be drinking that first vintage. You're not going to want to be.
Actually, we did.
Yeah.
We actually were able to drink a vintage in 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. When you planted those clones, or when you grafted those clones, you did experience some disease. But at the time when you were smuggling, did it ever cross your mind that you could actually be bringing diseased vines over? Or were you just, I don't give a shit, I'm just going to bring them over because I'm trying to get it over to California?
Okay, so I did eventually bring in a whole collection from France,
mm-hmm.
legally, right? I was a licensee of the French government. And when you bring them in, they actually dip them in hot water. So if there's any bugs, they're killed.
Mm-hmm.
And you turn it over to your importation facility, and they do an indexing on it and index it for virus. So these were perfectly clean. We dipped it in France. In Canada, when I brought them over, they had already been cleaned of bugs.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't bringing any bugs over. And since they were certified, I knew they were certified of all the viruses that importation facility would test for.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever they tested for was the same requirement here in the United States. So I had clean material.
Yeah.
It wasn't like going out into a vineyard and cutting some canes, walking into Aubryon or Lafitte or whatever, and cutting some canes and bringing them back, because those you don't know. You have no clue what you're even bringing back. In fact, I drew it up. And
when you were getting questioned by the Border Patrol, did you ever think what would have happened if you didn't swallow those receipts, or you didn't have that chance to swallow those receipts? You would have lost it all?
Yeah, I would have lost it all.
Would you have eventually gone back to California and tried to make wine? Would you have done time? What do you think would have happened?
If that failed, I was thinking about this. I'm sitting in front of the customs official that day when he was interrogating me. Mm-hmm. And I was already thinking about doing the same damn thing and going through Mexico. I was convinced to bring him in, man. They were I got to get these clones.
Yeah. Did you have any sort of particular expiration on the clones? So you got the clones and you haven't grafted them to rootstock. Was there a particular time that you had to get these on vine, or were you able to just keep them tucked away until that time?
But what was so cool about it is that when I talked to the fellow in France, the nurseryman in the south of France, he sent the roots and the tops to this guy in Canada under a grant from the University of Toronto grant to bring this stuff in. So it was very high level importation of the rootstock and the clone. And the guy in Canada grafted them and grew them 1 year. They were actually 1 year old bench grafts.
Oh,
So this was the real deal. No way to screw this up.
Talk a little bit about the oak tree. The story, it seems like it stops there, but there's another part to the story where you feel like you almost lose it the second time around. Talk about the oak tree story a little bit. It's a correlation to the Border Patrol.
You asked the question about, what could have happened. And I knew something was going to happen, right? They're not just, I thought maybe I'd come up and there'd be a tag on my door when I drove up, report to the sheriff's office.
We missed you.
But about a week or 10 days later, after I arrived back home, and the vines were right here in the basement of this building, and I see a little blue Volkswagen come tearing down Cruiser Lane, and it's one of my employees at the shoe store. Boom, she drives right up. She comes running in, and I'll never forget, it was so cute. She goes, "John, what have you done now? There are 6 policemen going through our shoe boxes. What are they looking for?" And here they were. They had traced it. See, they didn't give up. So they went to the, I don't know how they here I was in New York. So they went to the Buffalo United Parcel and went through the timeline, and they finally found 10 boxes, went to the United Parcel in Vacaville over here. And so they traced it. All right. I knew they're coming now. And about 30 minutes later, here comes 6 different cars coming to take me out. And they pull up, and there's a California Division of Food and Ag car, and Joel King was in that, and 5 policemen. They showed me their badges, and they got a search warrant. And they were standing 50 feet from where the vines were. So I could have lost them all that one morning.
Wow.
And I had to come up with a good idea that they would believe. So I said, the vines aren't here. They're over in Sonoma in cold storage. And there's a bunch of growers. I said, there's a bunch of growers involved. So if the word doesn't get out today, I'll have those vines for you tomorrow, 10 o'clock. And they shook my hand and said, you better have them at 10 or it's going to be trouble. And I said, they'll be here at 10 o'clock tomorrow.
You're like, oh shit.
So they take off. All right, 10 o'clock. And I go up, I get the phone book out, and I call California Grapevine up in St. Helena. And I said, I need 4,300 vines. And they said, what do you want, John? I said, what do you have? I said, I need some vines today. And they went, okay, we got some Sauvignon Blanc. And I said, I'll take them all. So I drive up and I load my pickup up with the Sauvignon Blanc. I bring them back here. And I had saved, I don't know why I did it. It was a stupid thing to do. If they were going to search, they would have found the boxes. I saved all 10 boxes.
Yeah.
And so I bought a scale and some receipt books down here at the hardware store, reconstructed my whole order based on what I bought on the clones, the rootstocks, and tied them in 25 bundles, just like they do at a nursery. And it took me till 1 o'clock that night with the help of 2 friends to put this whole damn order back together again with California vines.
Yeah. Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, Sauvignon Blanc.
Smuggled Sauvignon Blanc.
But you storm it, they can't tell.
That's true.
You can't tell. So, all right, so Joel King comes And hey, John, you got yep, I got them right here, Joe. So we load them in the back of his pickup, took them away, gave me a little receipt. And that basically was it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so paranoid at the time that they were watching me. So I took them out of the basement and I buried them. Had the boys dig a big hole in the back underneath an oak tree.
Yeah.
And so if they ever did realize that I'd switched them, then they're gone. They're buried.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing, you have to get those out of the ground within about 2 weeks because the ground starts warming up in February. And if you don't keep them at 4 degrees or so below, they'll start growing on you.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm waiting for some slaughterhouse, which is now Ragushi, the winery.
Oh, yeah.
Back then it was a slaughterhouse. And I called up their Ragushis and they said, I need some space in your slaughterhouse. And they, wait, John, as soon as there's some space, you can move your vines in. Okay, cool. So finally I get a call. Okay, you can move your vines in. So I get my dad's Econo line. And it was 2-door, big tall ones, 2-door in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And dad drives it down. And so I take it to the back and I uncover the ground. Everything's in plastic bags. So I threw everything back of the Econo and I pulled down to the house and I asked dad to take those up to Ragushi because I didn't want to be involved because they're watching me.
Yeah.
I thought that every time a helicopter went over, they got to, looking at Caldwell. So we're standing in front of the van, right out in front of the house here. And I look down Cruiser Lane. We could see all the way to 4th Avenue back then. And here comes the CDFA car.
Holy shit.
Joe King is coming. I went, oh.
They are watching you.
They were watching me. It had to be those damn, oh my God. So I jump in the van. And the van was pretty tall. And there's a garage right here by the house that the original owner built. And the first bay in the van in the garage, it's fairly low ceiling. And I didn't think about that. I panicked. I jumped in the van. I was going to back it in. At least get that out of the anyway.
Right.
I put it in reverse and I got halfway in and halfway out. And I beer canned the roof about 2 inches. I got stuck.
Yeah.
Won't go forward, won't go backward. It was stuck. Here I am sitting there, and here comes Joe driving up. He sees me in the van, parks right in front. That's just fucking it. I lost him. So I get out. He gets out, shakes my hand. John, I got you some papers for you to sign. He opens up his briefcase on the hood of his pickup, and here's one from U.S. Customs, and here's one from the state of New York, and here's one from California Division, Food and Ag, and Steve Bartasona wants you to sign one that he collected it and destroyed them, and it's okay. So I sign them all. He puts them back in his briefcase, puts it back on his front seat, and shakes my hand and says, I hope the next time I come out, it'll be under better circumstances. And we know there's going to be a fine, but we don't really know how much it is yet, but good luck. And he takes off. My dad's standing right there, and he can't fucking believe this just happened, right? We're standing in front of the 4,300 fucking vines, signing this agreement. This is too bizarre. So I figure it was a setup. Had to be a setup.
Dude, why? So one of my questions is, why were they pressing you if they let you go at the Border Patrol? Why did they come pressing you again if you were cleared from the Border Patrol? It's not like you escaped from the Border Patrol. Did they send like a search warrant out for a new investigation? Why did they still come at you?
It was, okay, see, really, it had nothing to do with customs or Border Patrols or anything like that. All this had to do with Napa, that they knew I had sent 10 or 11 boxes, whatever it was, to a shoe store in Napa of vegetative material.
Got it.
So it came under CDFA, California Division of Food and Ag, and it was vegetative material that I sent in illegally. So that's how come they traced it to Vacaville and then showed up at my shoe store.
John, this is exactly why you're such an icon, such a pioneer, because of this story and just all the nuances and the caveats. And I'm surprised they haven't made a movie out of this yet. Something for a motion picture. and put
You
this
want me
on
to
the
tell you,
map like that.
there is something I got to tell you. So we went through the whole process of why, right? You're not supposed to bring anything in from foreign countries, right?
Mhm.
Any vegetative material. Okay. I have a Paul Harvey ending.
Oh yeah.
Remember, you ever
Oh
listen
yeah, I know Paul Harvey.
yeah, the rest
The rest
of
of
the
the
story.
story.
Okay. I'm going to tell you the rest of the story.
Okay.
And I swear this 100% true. So that the summer of 84, we get them out of cold storage at Ragushi. We
Mhm.
plant them. We only lost 37 vines out of about 4,400 vines.
Oh wow.
Were really good vines. Like I say, they were bench grafted.
Mhm.
Put them in the ground and they took off. We had fruit in 86. So just 3 years later, we had enough fruit to make some wine out of. And that's when we knew right away, wow, this is different. Because I
Mhm.
had some Cabernet vines from Napa, and then I had the vines from France, and man, oh man, it was different wine. Okay. So we knew we had something. So now the word gets out. Abreu came out and got everybody wanted some of these clones.
Mhm.
Abreu made his own clones out of my clones. They became Abreu's clones.
Yeah. It's all because of you, man.
What the fuck? All right. Now I became a California licensed nursery. I become legit.
Yeah.
Okay. Pay my dues, all that kind of stuff. And about 5, 6 years later, I'm at the University of California. I'm in the office of Dr. Austin Goheen. Great guy. And he was ahead of the clean stock program for United States, basically for the whole country. And Austin highly recognized in the industry. And
Mhm.
I'm in his office and we were discussing rootstocks from Italy and his suggestions and this about this and about that. And we're getting up after the meeting in the morning and I'm going to go have lunch with him. And for some reason, I was in a good mood that day or something. And I said, Austin, I said, do you remember a guy about 5 or 6 years ago got caught smuggling in vines from Canada? He goes, oh, yeah, John. He says, they sent me samples of that stuff and I indexed it. Steve Bardesona wanted to know if he was bringing in any bad viruses or anything.
Mhm.
So I said, what was it? How'd it turn out? Oh, just all that stuff from France. It was shit. What do you mean, us? No, it was shit, John. So I said, well, so he says, you want to see? So he pulls down his 1985, 1986 indexing records and he thumbs through and he goes, look at this. Cab Saab 337. Look at this. Stem pitting, corky bark, Merlin. And this stuff was all just junk. And he died not knowing he indexed his own California certified vines. He
Whoa.
didn't know I switched him.
No way. That's
That
crazy.
happened. So
That's the rest of the story, dude. That's
that's the rest
crazy.
of the story. And then the 6 clones that I brought in, all now the Gabsop 337 has what we call leaf roll 2, because France,
Mhm.
we didn't even know about that virus back then until about, I don't know, 95, 96. But I still have 40-year-old vines and it doesn't show any leaf roll or anything. It's
Yeah.
a minor virus. And so anyway, the stuff got indexed and then indexes. Everybody wanted to make sure Caldwell's stuff was clean. I had a file of certifications this thick. Different vineyard managers, of course, they weren't going to put it out unless they had it indexed. Always came back clean. So
Wow.
I brought in really good shit.
That's cool, man. I want to jump in. There's a few things I want to talk about as far as your barrels and some of the things you do on property with your wines. You actually make your own barrels, and you've been doing this since 2013, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, I think you're one of the
Yeah.
only wineries in North America that actually makes your own barrels. And you also have the privilege of having Master Cooper Ramiro Herrera making your barrels. So I'm curious, what was it like? What inspired you to start making your own barrels, and talk about the correlation between your barrel production and also Aubryon?
So in 82, it was my first trip to France. Gallo gets me into Aubryon. And one of the things they show you on that tour in 82, they had their own little cooperage right there. So they buy a certain forest in France. They have certain cooper comes to them, makes their barrels with the wood they buy. It's a very concise project. And I thought, man, oh man, if I ever got into the wine business, I'd like to make my own barrels. All right. Roll ahead now. That was 82. Gosh, 31 or 32 years later, I'm in the wine business. Philippe Mielke wanted me to barrel ferment from about 2000 to about just till recently. We've been barrel fermenting. You know what that means? Where you
Yeah, like I was going to ask you a question about that too. I'll probably just put it in right now because you do barrel ferment your reds, but when you consider high temperatures, is that having an effect on your barrels, or does it have an effect on your wines in relation to doing tank fermentations at high temps?
so since I've been in the business so long, we go through a lot of phases, and we went through, and it's certainly changed. We went through the Parker phase,
Right.
Robert Parker, right? To make money in the wine business in Napa Valley, you had to have a good score from Robert Parker.
Totally.
What kind of wines, and I'm sure you know the kind of wines that Robert Parker liked. They were big, they were rich, super ripe, wheat finish, high pH. All right. And everybody was trying to shoot for a good score in Robert Parker, even the French. So in 2000, I was there and I was shown, I actually tasted some barrel fermented Saint Emilions, and they were really good because when you barrel ferment, the temperature of the barrel is whatever the temperature of the barrel is. There's no real, you can put it in a cool room, but you can't adjust it at all.
Okay.
But what it does, it has really good extraction. You got a very small, so for about 400 pounds of grapes go into a barrel. And if you got a new barrel, of course, I always had new barrels. It was delicious right out of the chute. So it was great Robert Parker wine. And that's why I needed to have Ramiro come pull the heads. Then we put our grapes into it. And then Ramiro would come and put the tops back on, and we'd ferment them. Then he'd come back out, pull the heads again. We dump them in the press and that kind of thing.
Right.
So we got into this cycle, and I needed Ramiro. And in 1 year, he says, I was laid off and I don't have a job. And I said, you don't have a job? And he goes, no, I don't have a job. And he says, I'm a master cooper. And I said, you're a master cooper? Yeah.
You know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He says, yeah, there's only 34 of us in the world. I graduated 20 years ago. And yeah. And I said, I'll hire you.
Yeah.
And that's how it started. That was 2013.
That's super cool, dude.
So that's how we evolved to the master cooper, making our own barrels. Oh, and then so I have to send him to Cognac because we don't have a cooperage here on site. I have to send him to Cognac. And the little cooperage that we asked, and we pay, of course, per barrel, is the owner of that cooperage. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
That cooperage used to make the Haut-Brion barrels.
There's the correlation, man.
Is that fucking unbelievable?
It's like a full circle, dude. That's crazy.
It's
Do
crazy.
do you have people that try to buy barrels from you or want to get barrels?
Oh yeah, we could be in the barrel business, no problem, but we don't want to be in the barrel business. It's cool being Brian Wise, myself, B Wise Vineyards, and Brion and Yountville. We're 50-50. So we're both, Ramiro makes barrels for him too. So it's enough barrels. He has to make about 400 barrels a year. So it's,
what do you end up doing with your barrels when you feel like they're expired? Do you destroy them or do you sell them off?
Sell them off. Nobody pays what they're worth.
Totally.
Nobody pays what they're worth. We use them 4 years, two vintages.
Okay, that's actually, I was going to ask that. My next question was going to be how many vintages before you feel like you're ready to go back to new barrel?
Yeah. And I remember too, so we only do in our gold, our silver, our platinum, we only do about 600 cases, 700 cases of those. And then not all the other wines that we make, like 8 different wines here.
Yeah.
Do we need brand new barrels? So that always gets the second use.
Yeah.
So we buy a few Terransos every year just to fuck
Mhm.
around, but it's enough to keep it going down the line and use them 2 times.
You mentioned something about your father drinking about a half of a bottle of rocket science, and I want to talk a little bit about some nonprofits. You have a couple of nonprofits that you contribute to. Wine to Water, which you help establish suitable and safe water supplies to communities around the globe, and the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation, which is what your wine, Rocket Science, is inspired by. And so I want to talk a little bit about rocket science and, of course, Joy's father, Robert, who was in space expeditions, space travel. He was the inspiration, the true core to the inspiration behind that wine. So talk a little bit about that wine, the nonprofits, and what rocket science means to you and your wife, Joy.
The tie-in between rocket science, the wine, and Cape Canaveral, the Kathy Sullivan was the first woman. She rode the shuttle up, and she had learned to they fixed the Huttle on 1 or 2 times that Kathy Sullivan went up. And she lived in Omaha. And in the old days, I used to sell wine through distributors. And my distributor was in Omaha. And somebody gave her a bottle of rocket science. So then she got back to the distributor, and he got back to me that, hey, you want to meet Kathy? She wants to use you. And this, that. So that's how the connection with the astronaut scholarship program happened.
Got it.
So I went back and I met her, and she took me up in her little plane, and she had an aerobatic dealio, and quite a girl.
Yeah.
And so we've stayed friends. She's quite a woman.
Nice.
And that's how the whole connection. Now, the word rocket science. So Joy has her definition of why we use it.
Yeah, we'll believe your definition to be the one.
So her dad was a rocket scientist, so that makes a perfect connection there.
Yeah.
But really, it ain't rocket science. If you have a great vineyard, it ain't rocket science. And literally, rocket science can have 7 or 8 different varieties in it. Whatever is left after we do our top of the line stuff and our club wines goes into rocket science. And it's always about 700 or 800 cases. So it ain't rocket science.
Yeah. It's true, man. It ain't rocket science.
It ain't fucking rocket science.
I love that, dude. And I'm gonna encourage people now, and then of course at the end of the podcast, encourage people to be a part of those nonprofits and to help give back.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to talk about on the podcast, and I'm glad you have a couple of things there that you're working with.
No, it's wonderful. Like it, yeah. When I first started, when Kathy Sullivan got me to go back to the astronaut scholarship program, they have an annual dinner underneath C5. The C5 is laying on its side there. The whole deal, 130 feet long, and you're having dinner on it. And the first time I went back, they were drinking this rot gut shit. It was some $18 bottle. And I said, man, you guys need better wine. Jesus Christ. So that's when we started with the rocket science. So for the last, I don't know, 20 years or so, or 15 years, at least they have a decent wine.
Hell yeah, man. They got some good John Caldwell juice.
What the hell?
So, John, you got a couple of wine clubs. You have Society of Smugglers and Society of Weinsteins. Just talk a little bit about these 2 different wine clubs. And if somebody's, say, on the fence, what makes one an advantage versus the other when somebody's trying to decide which one to join? I personally would think that they would want to just join both, but talk a little bit about the difference in the wine clubs.
The Society of Smugglers is 6 wines. We have, like I said, we have quite a selection of red varieties, right? The only one we don't grow here that is in the Society of Smuggler wines is Pinot, because we're too warm for Pinot. So we do buy some. Got a couple of clients that use my clones. Some of their vineyards are 30 years old. And I love, anyway, buying my Pinot from them. But we'll do a cab. And of course, everything is from our vineyard. And at around $100 to $95 and $100 is the average price for our wine club wines.
Yeah.
And that's Cab, Merlot, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec. We'll do a Syrah. Some years when the Syrah is really good, we'll do a Syrah for the club. It's all directed towards that club. Then if you can't afford that, and of course, rocket science that's what the Weinstein's is. It's 100% rocket science.
Okay, cool.
So that's a $74 bottle of wine. Still expensive, but yeah, we got 300 or 400 people in that club.
Yeah.
And they're just happy as hell having 6, 12, 18 bottles a year coming in of rocket.
Yeah.
You drink the hell out of it because it's good wine.
And for those that aren't watching this interview on YouTube, you got the rocket science hat on. So that for those that
I
are
got
listening,
that's right.
yeah, you got the
Okay.
rocket science hat on. Yeah, man. Either way, people can jump in and join. And another way for people to participate is you have a opportunity for people to actually make their own wines with you. I think it goes down to the labeling, the cork, the bottling. What kind of motivated you or inspired you to connect with the consumer and to work with them on creating their own kind of wine within your portfolio?
The fact that I have now 9 different red varieties and 2 whites, the Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, and all French clones. Basically, it's 95% French now, rootstock and clones. This is a very French genetic vineyard. It's the real deal here. It's been a experiment from the start. Which varieties work the best on this hillside? And we're down to, we've had more, but now we're down to these 9. And it's wonderful to have it for our club members to have. We have what we call a right bank, and a right bank is a Merlot Cab Franc, right? Generally speaking. And then we have a left bank, Merlot Cabernet. We've taken the French material, the French genetics here, and we copy the French in that. And so we have a cab and we have 2 blends. And then people that like Cab Franc will do that for the club, or a Syrah for the club. And then every year we do a Pinot, buy some grapes for a Pinot.
Oh, cool.
And it's a nice club to be in, and it's really good wine. We get 200, 225 for and then 300 for our platinum. And it's the same grapes and everything. It's just a different barrel selection.
Yeah.
So you're getting really good stuff in both clubs.
Nice. Super cool, man. Thinking about Napa Valley, I know you're a California guy, but also I feel like you're very much an old world wine lover, an old world wine connoisseur. And when you think about California, California is very much Cabernet driven. Is there something that you think California is missing in terms of varietals and in terms of varietal growth? Like, will California always be king of Cabernet one day, or do you think there's something else that's going to step in and dominate the land of California as far as winemaking is concerned?
California, and particularly Napa and Sonoma in certain areas, is the best place to grow Cabernet in the world. Bordeaux's catching up with us now, though. The weather is changing a little over there.
It is.
They're getting a little bit riper. 15% alcohol shit that they used to like. No,
yeah, they put their thumb down. No way, not anymore.
Not anymore.
No.
So, but Napa itself, and I've traveled virtually every Cabernet growing area in the world. This is the best weather in the world for Cabernet.
Yeah.
It's just the best weather for Cabernet. You can't beat it. So this is going to be part of our forever. And since I've grown, now we have 9 varieties. Merlot does fabulous here.
Yeah.
Our Merlot is fucking killer. Our Cab Franc is killer. But if I had to choose one, I'd choose Cab.
Yeah.
Going forward, though, as this global warming thing, if we continue just to inch up a little bit, doesn't take much increase in temperature to really force you into changing your varieties.
That's true.
It's going to happen. Now, some late ripening varieties like Tannat, Bordeaux, Carmenere.
Yeah.
I love our Carmenere. We have Carmenere.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, it's a great variety. And they're bringing Carmenere back in Bordeaux now.
Okay.
They didn't even have a clone of Carmenere when I smuggled that stuff in. That only got approved within the last about 8 or 10 years. And now they're starting to plant it in Bordeaux. It used to be a major variety in Bordeaux before phylloxera in the 1800s. There was a
Yeah.
warming period in the 1800s where things were warmer in Bordeaux, and they ripened Carmenere, but it's a very late ripener. So that's what I'm thinking, is that some of these varieties that ripen later could work very well here in Napa.
Yeah.
I planted an acre of Marcelon, which is a new Bordeaux variety. It's a cross, they crossed Cabernet and Grenache, and we're going to get our first crop out of it this year. It'll be interesting to taste.
Cool.
You ought to come. If you come, taste
I'm
it.
coming, dude. I'll be there. I do need to make a trip to Napa. I haven't been there for a long time, and it would be an honor to meet you, man. So it'd be an honor to taste some wine with you and talk about the good old days of smuggling.
Now, I don't smuggle too much anymore. I wouldn't put it past me if I ran into something that I might. Yeah.
Once a villain, always a villain.
Yeah.
So I got a question, John. You have your latitude and your longitude in your marketing, and it's on your social media, and you can see it. But for those that have seen it or they don't know, I personally don't know. If I had to guess, is this where the oak tree is at, or what's up with the latitude and longitude when you see it on the website?
If you hit the latitude and longitude, it'll just go on Google Earth. You just type that in and just bink, there's Caldwell.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if there was like a correlation to it being at the oak tree, because that was like where you were like, it's either make or break.
We're in that latitude one, the whole vineyard.
Yeah. That's cool, man. John, how can people learn more about you? How can they find you on social media and on your website? And also, how can they sign up to be a part of your wine clubs? You got a lot of swag online too. You have a lot of ways that people can interact through wine glasses, wine keys, things like that, and some cool gear. And also, how can they contribute to some of your nonprofits? How can they get in touch with John Caldwell?
John at caldwellvineyard.com. I mean, I got a shitload of emails every day. Really, the best way to get the real deal is to come for a tasting. If you can get your butt here and experience being here. The cave's 20-some thousand square feet. It's just a beautiful cave, and it's a great experience.
I'm going to leave all that in the show notes to the podcast, so people are going to be able to click the website, click the social medias. It will be an easy access, so people will be able to find you and follow you and stay in touch and purchase some wines.
Cool. Wonderful. And if there's any time you want to do a follow-up on like the barrel program, I mean, having Romero is cool. He could come down and join me, and just experiencing what it's like to be a cooper it's incredible what he went through getting his degree. There's a lot of good stuff there. People just don't know anything about buying a tree. We literally go buy trees.
Yeah.
And you got to know what you want. You got to have a good forester that can come in, cut them down and cut them up and age the staves and all that kind of stuff. It's a great topic if you ever wanted to do that kind of a zero in on it.
Yeah. What's funny is when I do make it to California, I'm going to have all my podcast equipment with me. And so you never know, we may post up in the winery and have Romero there, and we may just talk about cooperages and taste some wines and talk about the correlation between your barrels and the wines, and have a more kind of intimate conversation that way too. That may be a follow-up podcast one day.
I think you should, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
That'd be cool, dude. So I got one more question to you. I could sit here and chat with you all day. You're a cool dude. But my one question here as we close up, what do you think is the best thing about everything that you've done looking back on your journey and your career in the wine industry? Is it the risks that you took or the rewards that came as a result of the risks? So you're sitting here, you're looking around, you're in your office, and if people that aren't watching on YouTube, if they could see it that are listening, you do have this whole beautiful world at your fingertips because of everything you did. Looking back though, do you think the risks that you took is the thing that's most satisfying to you? Or do you think that everything you have as a result, being the rewards, is ultimately the most satisfying thing?
The risks, I love to tell the story,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just a goddamn story about a guy who wanted to bring in something he really believed in
Yeah.
at a time when nobody believed in it. It wasn't part of our business. And the fact that it turned out so good, and the fact that I was able to license the clonal material from France, bring it here, under license, it's all this is available to our industry now. And it wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been. I was the first guy they ever made a license to license their material. They didn't even think about it, that the world would pay them money
Yeah.
for the wonderful work they did. That to me is the most satisfying, that to know that I really did help the industry. By helping
Absolutely.
myself, I helped the industry. And it's cool to bring in all these different varieties, clonal varieties, really quality material, really has helped our industry.
Do you think that if there's anybody that's listening and they're on the fence about taking risks, as long as you're not advising them to go break the law, do you have any advice for them as far as stepping out on a leap of faith, or being a little bit more willing to take a risk? Is there anything that you would tell them that you were experiencing when you were doing what you were doing back in the day?
You mean if I was going to be like a mentor or something?
Yeah. Is there something that you think would be influential to somebody?
Oh, you got to have a wild and crazy personality like mine, where risk is not even a factor. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
You smell something that you think's going to work, you take. The financial risk was the biggest risk I ever took.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah.
I only started with $5,000.
Yeah, that's true. I remember reading about that. That's true.
And to risk, by the time I brought Brian in as a partner, I was $9.3 million in debt, and I didn't have any cash flow. Now, the banks, they'll go along here for 25, 30 years. Eventually, you got to make some fucking money.
They're going to be on the road behind the other cars, getting ready to knock on the door after everybody else leaves.
So anyway, risks are risks. But when you sniff, you want to go into a direction, no matter what age you are, no matter what age. I was 38 when I fell in love with planting the vineyard. So it's just go with it and go all the way.
Hell
I mean,
yeah,
no matter what happens, you're going to come out benefited. But in this case, where it came out so much better than I ever thought it would, I'm just thrilled to go through the vineyard today. And I know all the vines. We planted them all. We kiss them. I talk to them.
Yeah.
They like it. Here comes the boss. I'm in my ATV going through there. And fuck, they get a perk up. Here he comes.
Oh, dude.
You got to come out and see this place. It's awesome.
Dude, I will, man. I also want to tell you that this conversation today has been amazing. I'm glad that you were able to share in depth the conversation, and I wanted people to get an idea of the fact that you weren't just a pioneer in the wine industry, one of the old dudes from back in the day who created everything that we have today in wine, but you did some risky shit, man, to get us acclimated, to get us to where we are today as a culture in wine. And a lot of people are drinking these nice California Cabernets or these really nice wines, these blends from California, and indirectly you had everything to do with that because of the fact that you were willing to take that risk. And you're an entrepreneur, you're a pioneer. Dude, you're such a cool guy. And I just want to say, man, it means a ton to me that we had the chance to get to connect, and that I got to study about you and to interview you and to have you on the show. And I hope that now that people that maybe didn't know about you have had a chance to get to know you, that they're dying to get some wines and learn more about you themselves. And dude, when I tell you it's an honor, man, like I truly mean it, man. You are a legit fucking guy. And so I just want to thank you, man, from the bottom of my heart. It means a lot to me, man.
There is one thing that I'm proud of. I wrote a book about clones with Philippe Melka.
Yeah.
This was back in 1995. Everything basically back then was in French, and he happened to be a Frenchman, and smart Frenchman.
Yeah.
And he helped me put that whole thing together. Deborah Passon is now rewriting that book. She just got back from France and Spain in Italy just 2 weeks ago. And we're rewriting that book. But this time, a lot of things have happened in 25 years, right?
Totally.
Well, damn near more than that, 30 years. And we have to take in you brought up the subject about new varieties. We have to take into the fact that the whole world has changed in those 30 years with global warming.
Yeah.
So this new book that we're putting together, we're even using AI to help organize it, because it'll have the most up-to-date information that's ever been put into a fucking book on clones.
Yeah.
And that's coming out within next year.
Yeah.
So it would be great to do one of our little dealios when that book comes out. Michael, I can show you enjoy life.
Dude, I love it, man. I love life.
You're a happy dude.
Oh, yeah. I get excited about wine. I get excited about when something's passionate to me, I can't help but express it, man.
You get into it. See you soon, man.
I'll see you soon.